Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Estonia once again, and we're going to have a look at yet another of the beers that I brought back with me from a recent trip over there. So for this one, we're returning to a brewery that has featured on the channel once before. The last beer that I had from these guys was pretty solid, but for this one, we're going to go to the opposite end of the spectrum, and I'm very curious to see how that turns out. As I've said in other reviews, in my opinion, when it comes to getting an impression of a brewery, I think you want to have something from the lighter end of the spectrum, such as an IPA, something from the darker end of the spectrum, such as a stout or whatever, and then if you can, a lager beer will always be a good addition to that as well. So if you can get those three types of beer from a brewery, that should give you a good idea of what that brewery is all about. But for this one today, we are going to go to the darker end of the spectrum, and this is supposed to be quite a nice beer actually. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to southeastern Estonia, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Käbliku Pruulikoda. So this particular beer is called Penumbra. It comes in at 12.2% ABV, and this one is an Imperial Stout. So yeah, the last beer that I had from these guys was called Tulispesk, if I'm remembering the name correctly, but that was an Imperial double, whatever you want to call it, IPA, a West Coaster if I remember rightly, and like I said, that was a pretty damn solid beer. Now, this is one that I picked up at Coat in Tallinn, and the woman that owns that shop, very knowledgeable by the way, and I do recommend you go and check it out and talk to her, because she's got some great stuff in there, but she was telling me that this is a really nice old school Imperial Stout, and she recommended this one for me, and I took her up on it. So yeah, fingers crossed this is another good beer. Some of the other beers that she's picked out for me have been very good as well, so I've got a good bit of confidence in this one, should we say. But yeah, definitely cool to return to Käbliku Pruulikoda once again, and hopefully you guys enjoy my take on this one. So let's see how we get on then. A 12.2% Imperial Stout. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Käbliku Pruulikoda before, and hopefully we can add a few more to that list at some point in the near future, most likely the next time I go back to Estonia. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Estonian beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to quite regularly at the moment, because I still have quite a few Estonian beers left from that last trip, and hopefully we can get a hold of some more beyond that. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. Do check out the link to Coat down there as well, and if you get the chance to try some Estonian beers, I would highly recommend that you do. There's a very strong beer scene over there these days, and quite a few different breweries as well. But yeah, on to my brewery notes then, to tell you a little bit about Käbliku Pruulikoda once again. So, Käbliku Pruulikoda are based in the Käbliku Tourist Farm Complex in Põlvamaa County in the Kepli forest in southeastern Estonia. You'll find the brewery and the farm about halfway between Tartu to the north and Voru to the south. But the company was founded back in 2015 by Janar Karakac, Marko Muruma and Eric Absalon. By trade, Janar is a forest manager, while Marko is a builder, and Eric worked with geographical information systems. But apparently Eric experimented with homebrewing in university, and this was after he bought like a small homebrewing set from the Gambrina store, which I do recommend that you check out in Tartu. That's a very good beer store. They've also got one in Pärnu over on the coast, and there's another one in another town in the middle of Estonia as well, which I forget the name of. But after brewing alone for a while, he discovered that some of his colleagues in his company later on, Marko and Janar, were also home brewing. So they got together, they pooled their money, and they invested in a 50-litre Braumeister kit, and they continued their experiments before founding the company officially. They continued to expand, and by 2017 the brewery were producing around 40,000 litres of beer per year, and over the last few years they've just continued to expand that brewing capacity further with more tanks for fermentation and stuff like this. I think at the brewery as well, they let quite a few gypsy breweries brew there. I think there's quite a few breweries based in Tartu who brew at the Käbliku facility, but in Tartu itself you have got quite a few breweries now. You've got Anderson's, you've got Puasta, and I think there's a couple of others dotted around there as well. But on the tourist farm complex, they've got accommodation, fishing, swimming, camping facilities, saunas, seminar and party rooms as well. So there's a whole host of things goes on in this Käbliku farm complex, which is pretty interesting. But as of April 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 55 different kinds of beer, and you know, there's quite a few different things in there. When I was in the supermarket in Voru with my friend Seem, there was quite a few different beers from Käbliku there, but by that time ours was already stocked up with quite a few different things. So yeah, that was something I was avoiding, was buying more beers. But the next time I go to Estonia, I will be sure to pick up a few more of these and other things as well. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Käbliku Pruulikoda for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. So I'll let you just have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. As you can see, quite straightforward. You know, this little birdie thing here is the kind of symbol of Käbliku, and he is also on the bottle cap for this one. I will be keeping this bottle cap. The last beer that we had from these guys, the IPA, was in a 440 milliliter can, or was it a half litre? I think it was a 440 actually. But yeah, as you can see, 330 milliliter bottle in this case. I think I paid about maybe €6 or something like this, €5 or €6 for it. So for a 12.2% Imperial Stout, that is pretty decent, I would say. I wouldn't begrudge paying €5 or €6 for that. And of course in Tallinn it will be a little bit more expensive. Then on top of that you've got that it's you know, a kind of premium beer shop if you like, so you will pay a little bit more than that of course. But yeah, 12.2% ABV this one, very nicely presented. On the back here it says Penumbra is dark like an eclipse, and its speciality fills you with excitement and thrill when you happen to experience it again. So yeah, this should be pretty cool. 12.2%, it tells you it's going to be quite a bitter one on the back there. So maybe this is going to be a little bit more of a Russian Imperial Stout. So yeah, this should be pretty awesome. But let's get it out and get on with the tasting then. Very, very curious to see what this one has in store for us there. So this can go in with my other bottle caps there. Nice bit of smoke on the opening as we open it up, and we'll get it out and into the glass. So there we go. Always nice to review these Estonian beers. You know, got some great breweries over there these days. Pojala, of course, one of the first ones. Then Puasta, Leia Pruulikoda, Tanker, Sori. You know, Anderson's have been around for a while. You've got these guys who are quite well known as well, Käbliku. Yeah, I think there's about 50 or 60 breweries in Estonia these days, and for a country of only, what are they, about 1.3 million people, something like that, it is pretty impressive actually. So yeah, let me just line this up so that my OCD is happy, and there we go. So this looks pretty much as you would expect for an Imperial Stout. Before the head disappears, you could see there was about a 1/4 to a 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say, medium beige head. That's fading away to be a very kind of thin foamy layer there, but it's leaving a nice ring around the edge of the glass. Of course, when it's a big 12.2% like this, you know, it's not going to leave too much of a head in there. And this one also doesn't have wheat in it. Remember, wheat can help you maintain the head a little bit on the beers. But yeah, as you can see, this beer is pretty much black as night. If we shine the light through this, you do get a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola coloured edge to it. So yeah, dark ebony rosewood colour, a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola coloured edge, and you know, a kind of half finger, no, not a half finger, a 1/4 finger of a frothy head there that's just faded away to be a nice kind of ring. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But overall, it looks pretty damn nice, and pretty much what you would expect from an Imperial Stout. Remember, when it comes to the colour of these beers, it depends on 1, the type of malts that you use, and 2, the length of your wort boil. Adjuncts and barrel aging, of course, can affect it as well, but those 2 factors are not at play in this beer. This one is a proper old school Imperial Stout. Only barley malt in this, but yeah, a beer like this is going to undergo quite a lengthy boil, you know, probably 4 or 5 hours, something like that. But yeah, the more you boil the wort, or the longer you boil the wort I should say, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. But the colour of beer is dependent in the first instance on exactly what type of malts that you're using. Of course, in a beer like this, you're going to use black malts and, you know, carafas and all of these kind of things that will give you a very dark colour actually. But yeah, nothing really surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance when you consider what style it is. But yeah, certainly looks the part. But yeah, let's have a closer look at the aroma of this one then and just see how we get on. Very curious about this beer. This does smell pretty nice. I think it's one of these ones that's going to take a little bit of time to kind of open up and show you what it's all about. But it is a very old school beer, this one, and the other impression I have of it is that it's very smooth, and I've got a feeling this one might turn out to be quite a kind of silky stout in a lot of ways. But yeah, the aroma of this beer is very, very nice actually. You can smell the booziness in it as well actually, which is interesting. Yeah, I'm not farting by the way, it's my elbow on this table, although you guys will say I was now, but anyway, that's by the by. But yeah, the aroma of that is lovely. First impression of it is you have this, how would you even describe that? You do get a little touch of woodiness in the backbone there. There's quite a bit of that going on there, but it's almost as if the woodiness has a little bit of a sort of charred, chocolatey kind of thing just sitting on top of it. And it's not like black and harsh in a sense, but there's just a wee touch of a kind of cherry thing there. It's almost like if you think about like a really well fired bread crust, but just smoothing it out a little bit. That's the backbone of this beer. Yeah. And there's a wee bit of earthiness mixed in with that too, which is quite interesting. So yeah, it's like you've got a well fired but smooth bread crusty thing in there. You've got a smooth kind of oatmealy thing in this as well, but I think they would say, if it had oatmeal in it, I think they would say oats in the ingredient list, but it gives you like a sort of wholemealy brown bready element to it, but it's very smooth. I say, I wouldn't be surprised if there is a bit of oatmeal in this one. So maybe this beer is going to turn out to be a little bit somewhere between like an oatmeal and a Russian Imperial Stout. Oatmeal stouts of course give you that lovely smoothness, whereas the Russian Imperial Stouts are a little bit more kind of bitter in a sense actually. But the aroma of this one actually reminds me quite a bit of some of the Nerd brewing ones that we have here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. Lovely brewery that, incidentally, do check them out if you get the chance. But yeah, very smooth but still toasted bread crust in there, some smooth brown bready elements, and yeah, it's awesome how that goes together. It's almost to the point, the brown bready elements that you get out of this are almost to the point where they're kind of oatmealy. It's not more grainy like a rye bread, but it's really, really smooth. Mixed in with that, you get a lovely chocolatey element out of this one, and again the chocolatey notes come out as being quite high cocoa but still smooth at the same time. It's almost got a little bit of that sort of powdery chocolate. If you think about like a Nesquik powder that you would use to make chocolate milk or hot chocolate, and just, you know, increase the cocoa content of that a little bit, take it up from being like a milk chocolate at sort of 40% cocoa or whatever, 30-40% cocoa, up to somewhere in the region of like 60-70% cocoa. That's kind of what you're getting out of this one. It's got a lovely smoothness and kind of silkiness to it on the chocolatey side of things, but definitely a little bit of that stronger, more bitter cocoa element, which I really like, absolutely. So yeah, the aroma coming out of this one is very, very nice. The more that you smell of this beer, you do get one or two kind of woody elements out of it as well, and maybe a teeny little bit of nuttiness, but I'm more tempted to say woody in honesty. There's a little bit of there is a little bit of a kind of brown sugary element in here as well, but I don't get too much. You know, there's a wee bit of brown sugary sweetness right in the middle of the palate, but it doesn't come across as being sort of overly sweet or anything. This beer, the more I smell of it, it actually gives me an almost slightly leathery aroma, which is interesting, because you don't find that too often in beer. That's more often like a a thing that you'll get from whiskey and things. But the beer, it doesn't, don't get me wrong, this beer doesn't smell like whiskey, but there is just a little bit of a leathery sort of element to it, which is interesting. But yeah, in the centre of your palate, there is a little bit of a toasty, brown sugary element there, but I think it gets actually sweeter out towards the kind of edge of the nose, if that makes sense. So yeah, this is a really, really interesting beer, this one. It's got a lovely smoothness to the aroma. So that's one of the first things you're going to notice about this. I don't know how old this beer actually is. It doesn't have a bottling date on it. It says it's best before the 10th of the 2nd, 2023. So could this have been bottled in like 2018 or something like that? Could it actually be in a slightly older bottle? I don't know. I know that some of the beers in Coat, they a lot of them were big high alcohol ones like this, and they had quite a few beers that would have been a little bit vintage, if you like. So I'm really not sure when this one was bought. There doesn't seem to be anything around the neck about that either, so just guessing. But you know, a beer like this at 12.2%, I would think they'd recommend maybe about a 5-year like this. So maybe this beer actually does have, you know, 2 or 3 years of age on it. That could explain some of the smoothness that you're getting out of this beer. And there is a wee bit of sediment left in the bottom of the bottle. So yeah, maybe this beer has, you know, what would it be if it's 2018 bottled? Maybe anywhere between 2 and 2.5 and maybe 3 years on it. Probably something like that, yeah. So that's another factor to think about this one. That could explain a bit of the smoothness that this beer has actually. Because yeah, these beers often do kind of tend to mellow out in that way. If you age them a little bit, you will get a slightly more kind of silky, smooth kind of quality coming out of the aroma, and you can certainly pick that up in this beer, absolutely, 100%. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, there's still a little bit of hop coming out of this one. There's a wee bit of a kind of earthy note in the back of the nose, but at the front of the nose you do get a little touch of there is a wee bit of a kind of grassy, zesty remnant in there, and 1 or 2 little floral components. And again, this is something that's making me think that this beer has a little bit of age on it. Those kind of grassy and floral elements are just very subtle. They're not all that prominent, if that makes sense. Whereas if the beer was fresher, of course, you would get a bit more of that. Nothing wrong with that in an Imperial Stout, right enough. But yeah, it's just interesting to think about. Food for thought, as they say. But on the fruity side of things, this one is quite interesting as well. The more that I smell of this beer, actually, the more I get like a sort of chocolate brownie or kladkaka sort of thing out of this one, like a Swedish chocolate cake, but that soft kind of but still quite sticky brownie kind of thing. That's what you get out of this beer. But on the fruity side of things, yeah, there's a wee bit of raisin coming out of it. Definitely a bit of a kind of juicy, plummy element in there as well. And I've got a little bit of blackberry and a wee bit of a sharper blackberry than a juicier blackcurrant and figgy note kind of sitting underneath as well. So these are typical elements that you would get out of a beer like this. I would guess that this beer has a little bit of like Summit or Cascade, or well, maybe not Cascade, maybe a little bit of Summit or whatever. It's quite a common one to use in big Imperial Stouts like this. But yeah, the aroma of this beer is certainly very interesting. Just checking for my OCD again. I always like having the bottles lined up in these videos. But yeah, certainly take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of this one before you get stuck into it. That's a lovely beer, but I think there's a wee bit of age on that, definitely. So yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and see how we get on. This one is the Penumbra, if I pronounced it right. Penumbra, 12.2% Imperial Stout from Käbliku Pruulikoda in Põlvamaa County, about halfway between Tartu to the north and Voru to the south and the southeast of Estonia. Let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, skål, cheers, tervisex. Oh yeah. Tell you something, it's got a good bit of bitterness in the flavour. Absolutely. But yeah, this is a proper old school Imperial Stout. If you go back to, 2012, 2013, 2014, something like this, these beers, these types of Imperial Stouts were the ones that are all the rage. This is a proper Russian Imperial Stout. I thought it was going to be a little bit more sort of oatmeal-y and things, and in fairness it does have a good little bit of smoothness and things too. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a wee bit of oatmeal in this one, but yeah, it definitely comes across as being somewhere between a Russian Imperial Stout, leaning more towards that Russian Imperial Stout side of things, to be honest, but there is a bit of an oatmeal-y smoothness to this one, but that could well be to do with the age. And I do suspect there's a bit of age on this one. But yeah, I can see why the guys at Colt were recommending this beer to me. Lovely stuff. Yeah, this is definitely worth trying actually. I've got a feeling this could well be one of their first recipes that they've done. But yeah, let's kind of try and break down the flavour then. So, backbone of this beer, it really has a bit of a kind of bitter kick to it. You can feel that kind of black, roasty, toasty malt just forming the backbone of the beer. I would think it's maybe a bit of, I think it might well be a straight up black malt in this one, rather than Special B. Although there could be a wee bit of Special B there in it, but it feels like very straight up and kind of straight shooting in that roasty, toasty backbone that it has. And I can certainly appreciate that about this beer, 100%. But yeah, flavour profile of this beer is very, very nice actually, and it becomes more and more balanced the more that you drink of it. This beer opens up a little bit. But yeah, middle third of your palate, the backbone of the beer is 100% that toasty, roasty, toasty, well-fired, bread crusty sort of thing. If you go to the front corners of your palate, then move diagonally backwards, you will notice that there's one or two little woody elements come out of the beer, just on the front half of that kind of middle third of your palate. And if you go to the dead centre of your palate and then just follow the middle line of your tongue forward, you will, pardon me, get one or two little kind of nutty elements out of it too, which is quite interesting. But yeah, sitting on top of that roasty black malty backbone, you do get a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty element builds up. So there's a wee bit of a bread crusty layer. Then on top of that, there's a sort of proper brown wholemeal bready element there. So I really like how that goes together. But yeah, in the middle third of your palate, you've got a very nice, how would you say, there is a really nice kind of, what would you say, there's a nice little bit of that kind of smooth chocolatey sort of thing. Yeah, you can feel that sort of just smooth chocolatey layer coming out of the beer. So yeah, it's like a high percentage cocoa chocolate, you know, an 80-90% cocoa chocolate. You've just got a circle of that right in the middle of your palate, and sitting on top of that, you'll get a wee bit of a kind of brown sugary sort of thing. So in the very centre of your palate, you can feel there is a little touch of a kind of highly highly caramelised treacle molasses like brown sugar, but it's not overly sweet, to be honest with you. There's not too much of a brown sugary presence in this beer. But yeah, there is definitely a wee bit of it. There is a wee bit of that treacly molasses sort of thing in the middle of your palate, and as you move further out from that, it becomes a more kind of toasty brown sugar in a sense as you progress out towards the edges of the palate. But yeah, this beer, in a lot of ways, it's actually quite straight shooting, and you know, that's never a bad. It's not usually a bad thing. That sometimes having a beer that's a bit more straight shooting and old school can be a really nice change of pace, and I'm certainly enjoying this one. So yeah, it's just a really well crafted stout. This one, I think it goes together very nicely. A properly old school, you know, sort of 2012, 2013, 2014 era Imperial stout. But obviously these guys started in 2015, so it's been produced a little bit later than that. But yeah, it's a proper old school Russian Imperial stout, this one, I would say. It really sticks to that more kind of bitter, roasty, toasty edge, if you like, and I can appreciate that. So yeah, roasty black malty backbone in there, a bit of a kind of well-fired bread crust sitting on top of that, some brown bread in there, the kind of chocolatey circle, and then a bit of a kind of oily, yeah, a bit of an oily, treacly molasses sort of thing, and a toasty brown sugar out towards the edge of it. But yeah, I like how that goes together, and that's just the middle third of your palate actually, which is interesting. But yeah, on that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you can feel there is a little bit of a sort of cakey, browny sort of kind of vibe to it. You do get a little bit of that sticky, browny kind of element coming out of this one. But yeah, there's a toasty kind of well-fired sort of thing coming out of it. So yeah. But yeah, you do get a little bit of that cakey thing on that border region, but when you go into the back third of your palate, it actually spreads further back a little bit. The cakey element does spread back a little bit, and then you get a bit more of a kind of toasty, kind of grainy bite out of the beer again. And sitting on top of that back third of your palate, you can feel the sort of yeasty flavours coming out of this one. You can just feel that sort of slightly tall, more airy flavour coming out of this one. So yeah, at the back, the very back of the palate, the flavour's like this, and as you move forward, it gradually condenses down. It just gradually condenses down a little bit. Then as you reach that the border region, it just goes like that. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it's definitely a little bit more sort of condensed and things. So I can really appreciate how that side of things goes together in this beer. So yeah, it works. It certainly works, absolutely. And that's where the most complex part of this beer is, and it's very well executed, a properly old school Imperial Stout, as I've repeated a few times. But yeah, on to the hoppy side of things then. Back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness there, and as you move further forward, it does kind of smoothing out a little bit. The earthiness comes quite far forward, but as you move on to the kind of front corners of your palate, you get a little bit more of a, say, you get a little bit more of a kind of floral aromaticity coming out of the beer, which I can certainly appreciate. So you do get a wee bit of a kind of floral remnant on that front corner of the palate. Then round the front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit lighter and more kind of grassy, and there is a teeny little bit of zestiness lingering over in this one, but there's a lot to suggest in the malt base. The malt base really has a silky feel to it that makes you feel that this beer has got a little bit of age on it, because you can feel that most of the bitterness in this beer is coming from the malt base rather than the hoppy side of things. There is a little bit from the hoppy side of the beer, but that's what you get with an Imperial Stout. The bitterness, if you have a big Russian Imperial Stout like this, it really starts to rely more on the malty side of things for its bitter qualities, if you like, whereas if it's fresher, the hops kind of contribute a bit more too. But yeah, definitely round that front curve of the palate, there is a wee touch of a slight zestiness to this beer, which is interesting. But yeah, the further you go into the aftertaste with this too, you get a little bit more of a kind of woody element coming out of it, and some of that cakiness, that sort of brownie sort of thing starts to come out of the beer. But yeah, I think that covers the sort of green component of the beer, if you like, quite well. But yeah, border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you've got a little bit more of that kind of brownie element coming out of it, and there's a bit of a toasty, well fired sort of thing to that as well, which I like. And the base of that front third of your palate, it's got a nice kind of it's got a well-fired kind of bread crusty element to it. Again, you know, you can feel that sort of toasty black backbone there, but I think some of the bread crusty notes just smoothing it out a little bit. Then on top of that, you've got that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters come out of the beer. But yeah, on the back, at the back of that front third of your palate, you get a bit of a kind of plummy note sitting underneath. There's a wee bit of a kind of raisiny sort of thing. So yeah, you can get quite a little bit of that. You can get quite a little bit of that out of this beer. So yeah, a little bit of a raisiny sharpness sitting on top of it. There's a little bit of a more kind of oily, plummy element sitting on the back there as well. And as you move further forward, it develops a wee touch of a kind of figgy note right in the middle of that front third of your palate. But on the front half, it's kind of more, it is a wee bit more sort of, how would you say, it does get a little bit more kind of like black curranty, and then on top of that you've got a slightly more oily, it's got a slightly more kind of oily blackberry sort of thing there. So yeah, it's quite a typical Imperial Stout in terms of the fruity side of things that you've got, and you've just got a nice little bit of oiliness to the fruity character as well, so it offers you a wee bit of contrast to the more bitter elements of the beer. So yeah, just a proper old school Imperial Stout this, but it's very, very well crafted, and I certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink this again. Having a beer like this is a nice change of pace for me compared to some of the big sweet stouts and stuff that we're getting a lot of these days actually. So I'm pleased that I got this recommendation at Coat. Do make sure you go and check them out if you find yourself in Tallinn, in the old town of course, and you've got Uba as well is also a very good beer shop, which is just outside the old town. But yeah, awesome stuff. So in terms of the mouthfeel then, just to round off the review, this is definitely a full-bodied beer, there's no doubt in my mind about that. It's yeah, so definitely a full-bodied beer. Carbonation is it's really smooth in this one, almost to the point where it's non-existent. But yeah, the beer's got a really smooth and very silky feel to it, which I think is good. Yeah, it's as I say, it's just really well balanced, this beer. Absolutely, it tells you the bitterness on the back of this one is 76 IBUs. I think if I had been doing it blindly, I think I think I maybe would have got this one. I think I probably would have thought it was like an 80 IBU beer. I think I might have got this one. IBU, guessing the IBU is one of my weakest points in beer reviewing, because it's just something that I look it up later sometimes and I've got it completely wrong. But I think I might have got this one. I think I'm a bit better at telling the IBUs with stouts and things than I am with IPAs to a certain degree. But yeah, 75 IBUs. I would have guessed 80 for it, I think. Yeah, malty side of this beer, it's got a really lovely smoothness to it. You've got the bitterness underneath, and it does develop a wee bit of sweetness later on. But yeah, this is more a kind of smooth stout rather than anything else. I wouldn't describe this one as being overly sweet. It is almost like if you think about the level of smoothness you get from an oatmeal stout, that's kind of what you're getting with this one. But I suspect the kind of smoothness and slight silkiness you get out of this beer is perhaps because it's got a little bit of an age on it. But yeah, the hoppiness is contributing a little bit to the bitterness, but I think most of the bitterness comes from the malty base. And the fruity side of this beer is a little bit oily. It's got a wee bit of sharpness, but quite juicy as well, but mainly an oily contribution to the mouthfeel from the fruity side of things. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this video then. This has been a really nice beer, change of pace compared to the other stouts I've had recently, and I've certainly enjoyed it. So yeah, we can leave it at that then. So yeah, this was the Penumbra, a 12.2% Imperial Stout, like a proper old school Russian Imperial Stout. This one with a little bit of a sort of oatmeal-y stout type smoothness to it, but a beautiful beer, this one, from the Käbliku Pruulikoda in the Käbliku forest or sorry, not in the Käbliku forest, in the Käbliku farm complex in Põlvamaa county between Tartu and Võru in the southeast of Estonia. Very happy I got this recommendation. I hope you guys have enjoyed my take on this one, and I'll catch you guys very soon. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Käbliku Pruulikoda, and let me know some other Estonian breweries that you guys would like to see me check out. So thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Käbliku Pruulikoda, and I'll see you soon. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and terve sex.